invisible prison you call reality. What if the life you're defending isn't actually yours? Not your schedule, not your limits, not even your standards for what's possible. I'm not talking about fantasy. I'm talking about structure. The invisible framework that quietly dictates how you interpret everything that happens to you. Most people believe they're responding to reality. In truth, they're responding to their interpretation of it. And that interpretation was installed long before they had the awareness to question it. You wake up, you check your phone, you measure your progress against someone else's highlight reel. You label the day as stressful before it even begins. Nothing dramatic happened, but the frame is already set. The invisible prison isn't made of circumstances. It's made of conclusions. Conclusions like success requires suffering. People like me don't get ahead. I'm just not wired that way. These statements feel factual because you repeated them long enough to mistake familiarity for truth. But here's the uncomfortable realization. Most of what you believe about your life was absorbed, not chosen. You inherited rules about money, effort, relationships, risk, identity. Some were spoken directly. Others were modeled silently. Over time, repetition hardened into belief. Belief hardened into expectation. Expectation shaped perception. And perception built your reality. There's a moment that happens in childhood that almost no one remembers. It's the moment you stop asking, "Is this true?" and start asking, "How do I survive within this?" That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Instead of questioning the system, you adapt to it. If you grew up hearing that money is scarce, your nervous system learns vigilance. You become cautious. You avoid risk. You justify smallness as responsibility. If you were told that success belongs to other people, you don't even try. Not consciously, but your effort carries hesitation. Your ambition comes with apology, and you call this realism, but it's conditioning. Here's where psychology becomes practical. Your brain operates through filtration. It cannot process the millions of stimuli around you every second. So it filters, it prioritizes, it deletes. At the center of that system is a network often referred to as the reticular activating system, the RAS. Its job is simple: show you what aligns with what you already believe is important. Buy a specific car, and suddenly you see it everywhere. Focus on rejection, and you'll notice every slight. Expect opportunity, and you'll spot doors others walk past. The world did not change. Your filter did. Now scale that principle across your entire identity. If you believe life is a constant uphill battle, your RAS will highlight obstacles. It will amplify inconvenience. It will collect evidence to confirm your struggle, not because you're unlucky, because your brain is loyal to consistency. It would rather protect a familiar negative belief than risk the instability of a new empowering one. Think about two professionals walking into the same high-stakes meeting. One believes, "I'm always underestimated." The other believes, "I belong in rooms like this." Same environment, same stakes. The first scans are microsignals of dismissal, a distracted glance, a delayed response, a neutral tone. Their body tightens. Their voice contracts. They speak defensively. The second scans for engagement. Eye contact, nods, openings to contribute. Their posture expands. Their tone steadies. They project clarity. The room responds accordingly. Was it talent or interpretation? Reality didn't create their experience. Their internal narrative did. This is the invisible prison. Not your job, not your background, not even your failures. It's the story you've wrapped around them. And stories feel solid because they repeat. But repetition doesn't equal truth. It equals reinforcement. In Script C, we explored how beliefs shape perception. Perception shapes emotion, emotion shapes behavior, and behavior shapes results. That loop becomes self-sealing. You act in alignment with what you believe, then use the outcome as proof that you were right. It's airtight, unless you interrupt it. Most people don't question their beliefs because doing so feels destabilizing. If the rule isn't real, then what else isn't? If the limitation was inherited, then how much time was spent defending something unnecessary? That confrontation can bruise the ego. So instead, people double down. They rationalize. This is just how life works. I'm being practical. I've tried before. But notice something. Every sentence that limits you begins with certainty. And certainty feels safe, even when it keeps you small. Let's make this concrete. Imagine someone who believes deeply that they're bad with money. They approach opportunities cautiously. They avoid investment. They hesitate in negotiations. When they earn more, they subconsciously sabotage it. Overspending, undercharging, procrastinating. Eventually, they face financial strain. And what do they say? See? I knew I wasn't good with money. The belief generated the behavior. The behavior generated the outcome. The outcome reinforced the belief. The prison isn't external. It's recursive. Here's the shift. You don't need to fight reality. You need to audit the rules you're unconsciously obeying. Ask yourself, who told me this was impossible? When did I decide I wasn't capable? What evidence have I ignored because it didn't match my story? This isn't positive thinking. It's cognitive sovereignty. When you examine a belief, you weaken its automatic control. When you challenge it with disconfirming evidence, you create neural flexibility. When you deliberately install a new narrative and act from it consistently, the brain adapts. Neuroplasticity isn't abstract. It's operational. Your brain wires around repetition. So the real question becomes, what have you been rehearsing? The people who seem to bend reality aren't mystical. They simply operate with different assumptions. They assume doors can open. They assume skills can be learned. They assume setbacks are data, not identity. Because of that, they scan for leverage instead of obstacles. And over time, their results look like luck, but it's filtration. Right now, you're living inside a framework. Some of it empowers you. Some of it restricts you. The danger isn't having beliefs. It's mistaking them for facts. The invisible prison stays invisible because it feels normal. It feels logical. It feels earned. But logic built on faulty premises still leads to flawed conclusions. You don't need to escape your life. You need to inspect the lens through which you're viewing it. Because the moment you realize the bars were constructed from assumptions, you stop pushing against the walls and start rewriting the rules. Chapter 2. The game you didn't know you were playing. What if you've been trying to win a game without realizing you're the one setting the rules? Pause for a second. Think about that. Every frustration, every ceiling you've hit, every time you said, this is just how life is. What if that wasn't the game? What if that was just the rule book you accepted without reading? Here's the uncomfortable truth. You are not reacting to reality. You are reacting to the meaning you assign to it. And the language you use every day is assigning that meaning automatically. Most people never notice this because the game feels solid. It feels external. Bills feel real. Rejection feels real. The chair you're sitting on feels real. And physically, yes, it is, but at the atomic level, even that chair is mostly empty space. What makes it feel solid is interaction, perception, interpretation translated through the nervous system. Now bring that down from physics into psychology. Your words are the interface between raw experience and interpretation. They decide what something is before your emotions ever catch up. You don't just experience events. You narrate them, and that narration becomes the architecture of your reality. Let's make this practical. Two people lose the same client. One says, I knew this would happen. I'm terrible at closing. The other says, good, that shows me where the gap is. Same event, entirely different internal language. The first statement cements identity. I'm terrible. That's fixed. That's global. That tells the brain to look for confirming evidence. The reticular activating system, the same filtering system we touched on in Script C, goes to work. It highlights every past mistake. It mutes every quiet success. The second statement frames the loss as feedback, specific, adjustable. It tells the brain, scan for improvement. Same external reality, different internal script, different future. This is the game. And most people are playing on autopilot. Listen carefully to your default phrases. I can't afford that. I'm just not disciplined. That's not for people like me. I always mess this up. These aren't harmless comments. They're instructions. Your brain does not treat repeated language as decoration. It treats it as direction. When you say, I can't afford that, your mind shuts down creative search. The problem is labeled impossible. Cognitive effort drops. The spotlight turns off. When you say, how could I afford that? Something subtle shifts. The door isn't open yet, but it's unlocked. The brain begins scanning. Possibilities that were previously invisible now register. Language doesn't just describe reality. It primes it. Here's where it becomes personal. Imagine someone who constantly says, I'm bad with people. Over time, they approach conversations cautiously. Their tone tightens. They overanalyze facial expressions. They withdraw quickly. Other people feel that contraction. They respond with distance. The result? Awkward interactions, which confirms the belief. But it began with words. Not fate, not destiny. Language. And because the loop feels consistent, it feels true. In Script C, we examine how belief shapes perception. Perception shapes emotional state, and emotional state drives behavior. Words are the ignition point of that loop. They are the trigger that activates identity. When you repeat a phrase long enough, it stops being a sentence. It becomes who you think you are. Now step back. What game are you playing financially? If your internal language is built around scarcity, money is hard to keep. Rich people are different. I'm just trying to survive. Then every financial decision will orbit survival. You'll avoid risk even when calculated. You'll underprice your value. You'll hesitate in rooms where negotiation is expected, not because you lack skill, but because your language has defined your identity. The game becomes self-fulfilling. The same is true in relationships, in health, in leadership. Words create frames. Frames create expectations. Expectations shape outcomes. There's another layer most people miss. Your nervous system responds to language as if it's real. Tell yourself, this presentation is going to be a disaster, and your body prepares for threat. Cortisol rises. Breathing shortens. Your focus narrows to potential failure. Tell yourself, this is an opportunity to sharpen my edge, and the physiological response changes. There's still activation, but it's directed toward performance. The body doesn't know the difference between a remembered failure, an imagined catastrophe, or an actual threat. Language cues all three. So when you casually say, my life is a mess, your system reacts as if it is, even if objectively it isn't. This is the part that shifts everything. Your reality does not dictate your identity. Your identity, shaped by repeated language, dictates how you interpret reality. Think of it as a mirror. If you look into a mirror wearing a wrinkled shirt, you don't blame the mirror. You adjust the shirt. Yet when people dislike their circumstances, they attack the reflection. They blame the economy, their upbringing, timing, other people. But if your external world is consistently reflecting the story you're telling internally, then the leverage point isn't out there. It's the script in your head. and you are writing it in real time. Now, this is not about blind positivity. It's not about denying difficulty. It's about precision. Instead of, I'm terrible at this, say, I haven't mastered this yet. Instead of, nothing ever works for me, say, this strategy didn't work. Notice the shift. The first collapses identity. The second isolates behavior. That distinction matters. Identity statements are rigid. Behavior statements are adjustable, and the brain responds accordingly. The people who appear to bend circumstances in their favor aren't operating in fantasy. They are meticulous with language. They understand that attention follows words. If they label something as catastrophe, their mind searches for loss. If they label it as a challenge, their mind searches for leverage. They're not ignoring reality. They're directing it. Because wherever your spotlight goes, energy follows. And wherever energy accumulates, outcomes shift. So here's a practical exercise. For the next 24 hours, audit your language, not the dramatic statements. The small ones. Every always. Every never. Every I can't. Replace absolutes with specifics. Replace identity attacks with skill assessments. You will feel resistance. That resistance is proof that the old script has been running for years. But once you notice it, you can't unsee it. You'll begin to recognize that the game was never about circumstances alone. It was about interpretation. And interpretation is constructed through words. You are playing a game shaped by language. Every sentence either narrows your field of possibility or expands it. Every label either locks identity or opens growth. You don't need new luck. You need new phrasing. Because the rules you think you're living under are written in your own voice. Chapter 3. Your energy is your signal. Let me ask you something direct. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the tension before anyone spoke? No words. No obvious conflict. Just a tone in the air. Now reverse it. You meet someone who says very little, yet you feel calm around them. Steady, safe, focused. That's not mysticism. That's signal. And whether you realize it or not, you are broadcasting one every single day. In Script C, we explored how belief shapes perception and perception shapes action. But beneath belief is something even more immediate. State. The emotional and physiological energy you carry into a moment. That state determines how your words land, how your decisions unfold, and what kind of responses you consistently receive. Your energy is not a spiritual abstraction. It is your nervous system in expression. Most people try to change outcomes without changing state. They want better conversations while carrying resentment. They want financial growth while radiating anxiety. They want respect while internally rehearsing self-doubt. It doesn't work that way. Your state is the filter through which your words travel, and your words are the tools shaping your reality. Imagine a leader delivering the same sentence in two different states. First version, shoulders tight, jaw set, voice clipped. We need to fix this. Second version, grounded posture, steady breath, measured tone. We need to fix this. Identical words, completely different impact. Energy modifies meaning. This is why two people can use the same affirmation and get different results. If the words "I'm confident" are spoken through a body that feels threatened, the signal underneath contradicts the statement. The nervous system doesn't respond to vocabulary. It responds to coherence. Energy is coherence between what you say and what you embody. Now, let's dismantle something carefully. When people talk about attracting experiences, it's often framed as something external responding to your vibration. That explanation feels dramatic, but the mechanism is more grounded. Your state shapes your behavior. Your behavior shapes your environment. Your environment reinforces your state. Loop. If you consistently operate from scarcity, you hesitate. You grip tightly. You interpret neutral events as threats. Others feel that contraction and respond cautiously. Opportunities narrow. If you operate from sufficiency, you move differently. Your posture shifts. Your tone slows. You ask better questions. People sense stability. Doors open that weren't visible before. Same world, different signal. Let's make this uncomfortable. Think about a recent setback. Before the setback, what was your internal state? Were you already tense? Already expecting friction? Already narrating potential failure? Often the event feels sudden, but the state was building long before it. Energy accumulates through repetition. Repeated thoughts, repeated language, repeated emotional patterns. Over time, they become your baseline frequency. And baseline frequency becomes identity. I'm just an anxious person. I'm naturally intense. I'm always behind. Those are not traits. They are rehearsed states. The body learns them. The brain predicts them. The world reflects them. Here's where precision matters. Low energy is not about feeling sad. It's about feeling stuck. High energy is not about being excited. It's about being aligned. Alignment means your internal dialogue, emotional tone, and outward behavior are moving in the same direction. Misalignment is when you say, I'm fine, but your shoulders are collapsed and your breathing is shallow. The body always reveals a signal, and others respond to the body before they process your words. Consider this scenario. Two entrepreneurs pitch the same idea. One enters the room seeking approval. Their energy says, please validate me. Their words may sound confident, but the undertone asks for permission. The other enters seeking contribution. Their energy says, here's value. Their words carry weight because they're not begging for acceptance. Investors feel that difference instantly, not because they're mystical, because humans are wired to read state. Your energy is a context in which your words are interpreted. So how do you shift it? Not by pretending, not by suppressing emotion. Suppression compresses energy, and compressed energy leaks through tone, micro-expressions, hesitation. Instead, start with awareness. Several times a day, pause and ask, what state am I operating from right now? Not what you wish you were feeling. What you are actually broadcasting. Tight chest? That's guarded energy. Rush breathing? That's urgency or fear. Relaxed shoulders? That's openness. Name it without judgment. Naming creates distance. Distance creates choice. Next, regulate physically before you recalibrate mentally. Slow your breathing. Lengthen your exhale. Adjust posture. Relax the jaw. This isn't cosmetic. The body sends signals upward to the brain. Change physiology, and perception begins to shift. From that calmer baseline, your words naturally become more measured, more intentional. Then audit your language. If your state is tense and your self-talk says, everything is falling apart, you amplify contraction. Instead, try, this is pressure. Pressure can be organized. Notice the difference. The second statement doesn't deny stress. It frames it as workable. Energy follows interpretation. There's another layer most people ignore. Environment. Energy is contagious. Spend extended time around chronic cynicism, and your baseline drifts downward. Consume constant outrage, and your nervous system adapts to vigilance. Curate input deliberately, not to escape reality, but to protect signal clarity. Because over time, the energy you normalize becomes the energy you emit. And here's the part that matters most. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you consistently embody. If you want trust, embody steadiness. If you want opportunity, embody readiness. If you want respect, embody self-respect in tone and boundary. Embodiment is repetitive alignment between words and state. In Script C, we establish that belief initiates perception and action. Energy is the amplifier. It determines how strongly that belief imprints on behavior. Weak state, weak execution. Coherent state, decisive execution. The world responds accordingly. This is not about becoming perpetually positive. It's about becoming internally consistent. When frustration arises, feel it fully, but don't build identity around it. Let it move. State shifts are natural. Fixation is optional. Your daily work is not to chase high vibrations. It's to maintain clarity, clear language, regulated physiology, intentional attention. From that place, your signal stabilizes. And when your signal stabilizes, your interactions stabilize. When interactions stabilize, results compound. You are not at the mercy of invisible forces, but you are responsible for the state you practice. Every repeated emotion becomes easier to access. Every rehearsed story becomes quicker to trigger. Every posture becomes habitual. Energy is trained. And right now, you are training something. The question is simple. Is the signal you're sending aligned with the reality you say you want? Chapter 4. Breaking the rules that hold you back. Let's start with something uncomfortable. What if the ceiling you keep hitting isn't real? Not your income ceiling. Not your confidence ceiling. Not your "this is just who I am" ceiling. What if it's a rule you memorized so well you forgot you ever learned it? Most people don't feel trapped. They feel realistic, practical, responsible. They say things like, "I'm just being honest about my limits." But honesty built on unquestioned assumptions is still confinement. And here's the core problem. The rules shaping your life were installed before you had the authority to evaluate them. Some came from family, some from culture, some from a single painful experience you turned into a permanent law. Over time, repetition turned suggestion into structure, and structure became identity. Think about the invisible rules you operate under. You have to work 40 years before you can relax. You shouldn't aim too high. Security matters more than fulfillment. People like us don't do that. Notice how these statements feel factual, solid, mature, but where did they come from? Who verified them? Or did you absorb them during moments when you were just trying to belong, to stay safe, to avoid criticism? In Script C, we broke down how beliefs form loops. Belief shapes perception. Perception shapes action. Action reinforces belief. Rules are simply beliefs that have hardened into unquestioned policies. And policies dictate behavior without debate. That's the prison. Not bars. Not walls. Defaults. Let's make this specific. Imagine someone who believes, "I'm not entrepreneurial." Because of that rule, they never explore ideas seriously. When they feel creative energy, they dismiss it. When opportunity appears, they rationalize why it's risky. Years pass. They say, "See, I was right. I'm not built for that." But they never ran the experiment. The rule prevented the data. This is how invisible laws operate. They don't just influence your decisions. They determine which decisions you're even willing to consider. And what you never test, you assume is impossible. Here's another. "I have to wait until I'm ready." Sound responsible, strategic, but often it's fear wearing the mask of preparation, because ready is undefined, and undefined goals are infinitely postponable. That rule keeps people studying instead of launching, planning instead of publishing, thinking instead of moving. The longer it runs, the more legitimate it feels, until it becomes personality. So, how do you break a rule that feels true? You interrogate it like a lawyer. Pick one area where you feel stuck. Career, money, relationships, health. Then ask directly, what rule am I following here? Be precise. Not, "I'm unlucky." That's vague. Try, "I must avoid conflict to keep relationships stable." Or, "I need external validation before I commit." Or, "If I fail publicly, it's permanent." Write it down exactly as it sounds in your head. Now pause. Is it universally true, or is it a strategy that once protected you? Because many rules begin as protection. You learned that speaking up led to criticism, so you created the rule, stay quiet. It worked once. It reduced discomfort. But protection strategies don't always age well. What kept you safe at 12 may be limiting you at 35. The next step is not blind positivity. It's strategic replacement. You don't delete a rule. You upgrade it. If the old rule says, I'm not good enough to lead, replacing it with I'm unstoppable will feel fake. Instead, try. Leadership is a skill, not a trait. That statement is believable, flexible, actionable. Your brain resists extremes, but accepts nuance. This matters, because the goal isn't to chant new words. It's to install functional rules that expand behavior. There's a psychological principle at work here. Your mind acts like a defense attorney for your existing beliefs. Once a rule is in place, your perception filters for supporting evidence. That filtering process, again, something we explored earlier, ensures consistency. So when you change a rule, you temporarily destabilize that system. You'll feel friction, doubt, an urge to retreat to the familiar script. That discomfort is not proof the new rule is wrong. It's proof the old one was automated. And automation hates interruption. Let's talk about reinforcement. If you install a new rule, I can learn what I don't know, but never act on it, it remains theoretical. Action is what hardens new beliefs. Sign up for the course. Have the difficult conversation. Apply for the position. Behavior sends evidence back to the brain. Evidence reshapes identity. This is how you dissolve old walls. Not by arguing with them endlessly, but by walking through where they used to be. Environment plays a role here too. If your new rule is growth-oriented, but your social circle constantly reinforces caution, you'll feel internal conflict. Humans calibrate to their surroundings, so curate input deliberately. Conversations, media, mentors, not to escape reality, but to normalize expansion, because whatever is normalized becomes permissible, and whatever feels permissible becomes actionable. There's a study often referenced where workers were told their daily tasks counted as exercise. Without changing routines, measurable health markers improved. Why? Because interpretation shifted. The activity didn't change. The meaning did. Meaning alters physiology. Physiology alters performance. Now apply that to your own life. If you reinterpret challenges as training instead of punishment, your response shifts. If you reinterpret rejection as data instead of identity, resilience increases. Rules define meaning. Meaning defines response. Response defines outcome. Most people are negotiating with reality using outdated policies. They think they're constrained by circumstance, but often they're constrained by internal legislation written years ago. And here's the critical part. The door isn't locked. It's simply untested. You don't need permission to rewrite your rules. You need awareness that you're following them. Because once a rule is visible, it's debatable. And once it's debatable, it's editable. Your life is not a fixed structure handed down by external authority. It's a system influenced daily by the language you accept as law. The question isn't whether rules shape your reality. They do. The real question is whether you're still living by rules you never consciously chose. Chapter 5, The Master Key, Your Beliefs. Let me start with something uncomfortable. If I followed you for a week, not your actions, not your results, just your private self-talk, I could predict your future with disturbing accuracy. Not because I'm psychic, because your beliefs are. Every quiet sentence you repeat to yourself is not commentary. It's instruction, and your brain obeys. Most people think their circumstances shape their beliefs. But if you look closely, the pattern runs in reverse. Your beliefs filter what you see, what you attempt, what you tolerate, and what you unconsciously sabotage. They don't just describe your reality, they generate it. Scripsy established that you're playing a game most people don't realize they're in. This chapter is where you discover the control panel. Beliefs are the master key, not the ones you post online, not the ones you claim in interviews, the ones you whisper when no one is watching. I'm just not that disciplined. I'm not leadership material. People like me don't build things like that. Those sentences feel harmless. They are not. They are identity contracts. And identity always wins. Here's the part high performers eventually realize. Your life does not rise to your goals. It falls to the level of your identity. And identity is built on belief. Every decision you've made, every risk you avoided, every opportunity you pursued, passed through a belief filter first. If the opportunity aligned with who you believed you were, you moved. If it threatened that identity, you hesitated or self-sabotaged. This isn't weakness. It's neurological efficiency. Your brain runs on pattern confirmation. Deep inside, a filtering system is constantly scanning your environment for proof that your beliefs are correct. It ignores contradictions. It highlights alignment, not because it's malicious, because it's efficient. If you believe you're bad with money, your mind will magnify every financial mistake and minimize every smart decision. If you believe you're socially awkward, you will remember every pause in conversation and forget every moment of connection. The filter is neutral. It simply serves what you install. That means the real leverage point in your life is not strategy, it's belief architecture. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of your core beliefs were installed before you had the cognitive maturity to question them. A teacher's offhand comment, a parent's anxiety about risk, a failure you experienced at 14. One emotional moment can crystallize into a lifelong rule. I'm not creative. I'm not athletic. I'm not good under pressure. The brain loves shortcuts. It takes one data point and converts it into identity to conserve energy. But conserving energy is not the same as creating expansion. So let's examine something critical. Belief is not merely a thought. It's a physiological directive. When you believe something deeply, your body adjusts to match it. Confidence changes posture. Fear changes breathing. Expectation changes hormone release. There are documented cases where people experience real physical improvement from inert treatments simply because they expect them to work. The body responds to belief as if it were chemistry. Now flip that. If positive expectation can mobilize healing, what do chronic negative expectations mobilize? If you wake up believing today will be exhausting, your nervous system prepares for threat. If you enter a room believing you don't belong, your micro-behaviors signal hesitation. Others read that signal. They respond accordingly. The belief becomes self-fulfilling, not mystically, behaviorally. This is why belief is the master key. It unlocks or locks every room before you even enter. So let's make this precise. First, identify the belief beneath the frustration, not the surface complaint, the root sentence. If you feel stuck in your career, the belief might be, I don't have what it takes to move up. If relationships repeat the same pattern, the belief might be, I have to earn love. If you chronically delay ambition, the belief might be, if I try fully and fail, it will prove I'm not capable. Notice how these are identity level statements, not situational ones. Now here's where most people go wrong. They try to overwrite beliefs with motivational slogans. That rarely works. The brain rejects affirmations that feel dishonest. Instead, you must destabilize the old belief first. Ask, when did I decide this? What evidence am I ignoring? Who would I be without this story? Often, you'll discover the belief was formed in a moment that no longer reflects your current capacity. A teenage humiliation, an early rejection, A single loss interpreted as permanent identity. Beliefs feel ancient and objective. In reality, many are outdated survival strategies, now replaced carefully, not with fantasy, with functional expansion. If the old belief is, I'm not smart enough to succeed, a powerful replacement is not, I'm a genius. It's, I can acquire any skill I'm willing to practice. That belief is operational. It invites action. It aligns with growth. And it's difficult for the brain to reject because it's empirically defensible. Belief replacement must be believable. Next, reinforce through evidence generation. Your brain needs proof, so manufacture it intentionally. If your new belief is, I can learn complex things, then enroll in something challenging. Finish one module, track progress, create micro wins. Action is the fastest way to rewire belief because it produces data. Without action, belief work becomes intellectual entertainment. With action, it becomes identity reconstruction. But here's the discipline most people avoid: consistency. Repetition is how belief solidifies. The same way your old identity was formed, through repeated reinforcement, your new one requires deliberate rehearsal. This does not mean chanting phrases in the mirror. It means aligning daily behavior with the upgraded belief until the evidence becomes undeniable. Think of it as cognitive strength training. One repetition changes nothing. 100 repetitions change structure. Over time, the new belief stops feeling aspirational. It feels factual. And when belief feels factual, behavior becomes automatic. You don't force yourself to act confident. You act congruently because confidence aligns with identity. That is the inflection point. Let's anchor this in something practical. Tonight, write down one area where you feel friction. Beneath it, write the sentence that explains it, the belief you've been operating from. Then write a replacement belief that expands capacity without triggering internal resistance. Tomorrow, take one action that would only make sense if the new belief were true. Small, specific, repeatable. Do it again the next day. You are not trying to become someone else. You are dismantling a false constraint. Remember this: beliefs are not permanent structures. They are practiced thoughts. And whatever has been practiced can be retrained. The world you experience externally will always mirror the identity you carry internally, not symbolically, behaviorally. Change the belief, shift the filter, alter the decisions. The results follow. This is not optimism. It is architecture. Belief is a master key. Chapter 6. Action. The bridge between dreams and reality. Let me start with a hard truth. The version of you that keeps planning is not the version that changes your life. You don't need another insight. You need movement. Right now, there is something you already know you should be doing. A call you postponed. A proposal sitting in drafts. A conversation you've rehearsed but never initiated. And the longer you wait, the heavier it feels. We tell ourselves we're waiting for clarity, for confidence, for the right conditions. But if you look closely, waiting is just fear wearing a suit. Earlier, we established that belief shapes perception, that the internal script determines what you notice, what you attempt, what you tolerate. But here's the shift most people miss. Belief does not solidify through thinking. It stabilizes through action. Action is identity under construction. You don't become confident and then act. You act, and confidence recalibrates around the evidence. Consider how the brain updates itself. It does not revise identity because you argue with it. It revises identity because you gave it new data. If you labeled yourself not disciplined, and then you wake up tomorrow and complete one difficult task before checking your phone, your brain records that. It doesn't immediately erase the old story, but it introduces friction. The narrative weakens. Repeat the behavior, and something subtle begins to shift. The label starts to feel inaccurate. The identity begins to evolve. This is neuroplasticity in practice. Your nervous system adapts to what you repeatedly do. Every action either reinforces your current identity or disrupts it. That means an action is not neutral. It is reinforcement of the old self. Let's make this concrete. Think of a professional who wants to lead but avoids speaking in meetings. They study leadership. They consume content. They journal. Yet when the moment arrives, they stay silent. Each silence confirms the identity. I'm not that kind of person. Now imagine they speak once. Not perfectly, not eloquently, just once. That moment becomes a crack in the old belief. Speak again next week. And again, the identity cannot hold its previous shape forever. It must reorganize around behavior. Clarity does not precede movement. Movement produces clarity. Think of driving at night. Your headlights don't reveal the entire highway. They reveal enough for the next stretch. And as you move, more road appears. If you stand still, the road never expands. Overthinking feels productive because it simulates progress. But the brain treats imagination and execution differently. Only execution generates feedback, and feedback is the raw material for growth. So ask yourself directly, what action are you avoiding because it threatens your current identity? Be precise. Is it applying for a role you secretly want? Raising your rates? Ending a misaligned commitment? Starting before you feel ready? That action is not random. It sits at the edge of your current self-concept. That's why it creates discomfort. Discomfort is not a warning sign of incapacity. It is often evidence of expansion. Here is a principle that high performers internalize. Readiness is a byproduct of repetition, not a prerequisite. No one feels ready the first time they step into a larger arena. They step and then they adapt. If you wait to feel prepared, you delay the adaptation process. Now let's introduce something practical and precise. The rule of minimum viable action. Choose one domain you want to upgrade: health, income, relationships, visibility. Instead of designing a full transformation, define the smallest action that meaningfully aligns with the identity you want. If you want to become someone who writes, the action is not finish a book. It is write 200 words a day. If you want to become financially disciplined, it is not build wealth. It is track every expense for 24 hours. If you want to become confident, it is not be charismatic. It is ask one direct question in the next meeting. The action must be small enough to eliminate excuses, but significant enough to create evidence. Then repeat it. Consistency converts behavior into identity. Momentum is not built through intensity. It is built through continuity. At first, it feels almost insignificant. A glass of water instead of soda. A 5-minute workout. A single uncomfortable email. But repetition compounds. What felt minor becomes structural. And here's what changes. You stop negotiating with yourself. When an action becomes part of who you are, it no longer requires motivation. It requires alignment. Let's address fear directly. Fear thrives in abstraction. It magnifies imagined consequences. But the moment you act, the unknown becomes data. You send the email. Now you know the response. You make the call. Now you understand the tone. You publish the idea. Now you see the feedback. Data shrinks distortion. In high-pressure environments, professionals are trained to move toward the signal, not away from it. The same applies here. If something triggers anxiety but aligns with growth, it is often the correct direction. There's a simple tactical intervention for hesitation. The 60-second entry. Choose the task you've been avoiding. Set a timer for 1 minute. Commit to starting, not finishing, for 60 seconds. The objective is not output. It is initiation. Most resistance dissolves after initiation. Because the brain shifts from anticipation mode to execution mode. Once engaged, momentum carries you further than willpower ever could. Action also regulates emotion. When you feel stagnant, uncertain, or frustrated, forward motion restores agency. Even small movement reminds your nervous system that you are not trapped, you are choosing, and choice is power. Earlier chapters established that your words shape perception and belief. This is where language becomes embodied. When you say, I am becoming disciplined, and then you complete one disciplined act, the statement gains credibility. Without action, language erodes trust. With action, language becomes architecture. You do not need to overhaul your life this week. You need one decision that aligns with the future you, then another tomorrow. Transformation rarely announces itself dramatically. It accumulates quietly through daily behavior that most people deem too small to matter. But small actions repeated alter identity. Altered identity changes decisions. Changed decisions reshape reality. Right now, there is a next step available to you. Not the 10-year plan, not the perfect blueprint, the next visible move. Take it, not because you feel ready, but because readiness is built in motion. Chapter 7, Quantum Change, when everything shifts at once. Let me begin with something that might unsettle you. Your life can change in a single moment, not gradually, not politely, not after years of grinding. In a moment, a decision, a sentence, a shift in identity, and suddenly the old trajectory collapses. Most people don't believe this because they've been conditioned to think change is linear. Effort in, progress out, step by step, slow and predictable. But if you examine your own life closely, the biggest shifts didn't happen incrementally. They happened when something clicked, a realization, a line you refused to cross again, a standard you raised. Earlier, we explored how beliefs shape perception and how action rewires identity. Now we go deeper, because there are moments when belief, emotion, and action lock into alignment, and when they do, the shift is disproportionate to the effort. This is what feels like a quantum leap, not magic. Alignment. Here's why most people work hard and still feel stuck. They are divided internally. They say they want success, but privately doubt they can sustain it. They pursue opportunity, but emotionally brace for failure. They act, but their identity hasn't caught up. That internal conflict creates drag. You can't accelerate while pulling against yourself. Alignment removes the drag. Let's define it clearly. There are 3 layers operating in you at all times. Your thoughts, the narrative you run. Your emotions, the energy behind the narrative. Your actions, the behavior that materializes both. When those 3 contradict each other, progress is inconsistent. When they reinforce each other, progress compounds. Imagine someone who says, I want to build something meaningful. That's the thought. But underneath, they feel unworthy or behind. That's the emotion. So their actions become cautious, half committed. They hesitate to publish, delay outreach, underprice their work. The outcome matches the lowest layer, the emotion. Now imagine the same desire, but the emotional layer shifts. They feel capable, grounded, certain that growth is earned through iteration. Their actions change. They move faster. They recover quicker. They tolerate discomfort. The external results begin to accelerate. Not because the universe intervened, but because internal alignment eliminated friction. Alignment feels powerful because it is coherent, and coherence amplifies output. Let's make this practical. First, clarify one outcome you genuinely want, not something socially impressive, something personally meaningful. Be specific. Vague desires create vague execution. Instead of more income, define the number. Instead of better relationships, define the dynamic. Instead of more confidence, define the behavior. Specificity sharpens focus. Second, audit the belief layer. Ask yourself, what do I currently believe about my ability to create this? Be honest, not aspirational. Honest. If the belief contains doubt, don't suppress it. Surface it. Because misalignment hides in unexamined resistance. Then upgrade the belief, not a fantasy, but to capability. Not, this will be easy, but I can learn what this requires. That distinction matters. The brain rejects exaggeration. It accepts growth. Third, regulate the emotional layer. Emotion is not decoration. It is fuel. If you pursue a goal from anxiety, your nervous system interprets the journey as threat. You rush. You grasp. You burn out. If you pursue it from grounded certainty, your system interprets it as expansion. You endure. You adapt. You stay in the game long enough to win. So, how do you shift emotion intentionally? Visualization is one method, but not fantasy visualization. Embodied rehearsal. Close your eyes and imagine having already executed the necessary behaviors, not just enjoying the outcome. Feel what it's like to operate at that level. The calm, the focus, the self-respect. Your nervous system does not perfectly distinguish between vividly imagined rehearsal and lived experience. You are priming it for congruence. Now the final layer, action. Alignment without action is hallucination. Break the outcome into immediate behaviors. What must happen this week? Today? In the next hour? Then execute, even imperfectly. Here's where the exponential effect appears. When thought, emotion, and action are aligned, feedback loops accelerate. Results arrive faster. Confidence increases faster. Decisions sharpen faster. The system feeds itself. That acceleration feels like bending reality, but it's simply coherence generating momentum. Let's address something often misunderstood. People talk about energy in abstract terms, but in performance psychology, energy is measurable. It's attention. It's emotional regulation. It's physiological state. If your attention is scattered, your results will be scattered. If your emotional baseline is fear, your behavior will be defensive. If your physiology is chronically stressed, your cognition narrows. Clearing internal static is not mystical, it's strategic. There's a simple reset you can use when you feel misaligned. Pause. 3 slow breaths. Longer exhale than inhale. Name the emotion without judgment. Then ask, what would the aligned version of me do next? Not the perfect version, the aligned one. Take that step immediately. Alignment is not a permanent state. It is a practice of correction. Now consider this. Major life shifts often hinge on single decisions. Accepting an opportunity you almost declined. Ending a pattern you tolerated for years. Raising a boundary once and meaning it. From the outside, it looks sudden. From the inside, it's the moment identity catches up with intention. That is the quantum shift. Not random luck. Not cosmic favoritism. A convergence point where your internal architecture becomes strong enough to support a new reality. You don't need to force transformation. You need to reduce internal contradiction. When your language supports your belief stabilizes your emotion, and your emotion fuels decisive action. The pace of change increases. Right now, there is likely one area in your life waiting for alignment. You already know where it is. The friction is a signal. Instead of asking, why isn't this working? Ask, where am I divided? Unify that, because when you stop pulling against yourself, progress stops feeling like struggle and starts feeling like inevitability. And that's when everything shifts. Chapter 8. Making transformation your lifestyle. Let me ask you something most people avoid asking themselves. Who are you when excitement fades? Not the version of you that feels inspired after a breakthrough. Not the version that journals intensely for 3 days. Not the version that declares, "This is the new me." Who are you on a random Tuesday when no one is watching? That answer determines everything. It's easy to feel powerful during moments of insight. It's harder to operationalize that power when life returns to routine. Earlier, we dismantled old rules. We rewired beliefs. We aligned thought, emotion, and action. But none of that matters if it becomes a temporary surge instead of a structural shift. Transformation that isn't integrated becomes a memory, and your brain loves returning to memory. Here's why people relapse into old patterns. Familiarity feels safe. Even if the old identity created frustration, it was predictable. Predictability reduces cognitive load. The nervous system relaxes in the known, even when the known is limiting. Growth, on the other hand, introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty requires energy. So, if you want transformation to last, you don't rely on motivation. You design stability. You convert change into lifestyle. Let's get precise. A lifestyle is not intensity. It's repetition. It's what you do consistently enough that it stops feeling like effort. It becomes baseline. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't debate it. You don't negotiate with it. It's embedded. That's what sustainable transformation looks like. Embedded identity, not emotional spikes. The mistake most people make is aiming for dramatic reinvention. They overhaul everything at once. New routine, new diet, new goals, new social circle. It feels heroic for a week. Then cognitive fatigue sets in. The system collapses. Instead, upgrade your baseline gradually, but permanently. Start with one daily alignment ritual. 10 minutes is enough. Morning recalibration. Before you consume information, create direction. Close your eyes and mentally rehearse the version of you you're becoming. Not fantasize about results, but visualize in behavior. How do you speak? How do you carry yourself? How do you respond under pressure? This is not daydreaming. It is identity priming. Then write one sentence that defines a standard for the day. Not 10 goals, one standard. Today I operate with clarity. Or today I follow through. Simple, precise. Throughout the day, measure behavior against that standard. In the evening, conduct a brief audit. Not self-criticism, self-observation. Did your actions reflect the identity you are building? If not, where did you drift? Drift is data. This daily loop does something powerful. It keeps your transformation conscious. Without conscious reinforcement, the old identity regains dominance. Now let's address environment. Your surroundings either reinforce your future or anchor you to your past. Look at your digital inputs. What are you consuming? Does it normalize mediocrity or elevate standards? Your attention is currency. Spend it intentionally. Look at your physical space. Is it organized in a way that supports focus, or does it signal chaos? Order influences cognition more than most people realize. Look at your social ecosystem. The people around you subtly calibrate your sense of normal. If ambition is mocked in your circle, you will unconsciously downregulate. If growth is expected, you will rise to meet it. You don't need to abandon relationships, but you must become deliberate about proximity. Lifestyle transformation also requires emotional maturity. There will be days you regress, days you procrastinate, days the old voice resurfaces. This is not failure. It is neurological inertia. What matters is response time. High performers are not immune to drift. They simply correct faster. Instead of saying, "I'm back to square one," they say, "I'm recalibrating." Language shapes resilience. Remember what we established earlier. Your words construct perception. If you label a setback as collapse, your behavior follows collapse. If you label it as feedback, your behavior follows adaptation. Consistency does not mean perfection. It means returning. Let's anchor this in identity again. Ask yourself, what would it look like if growth were simply who you are? Not a project, not a season, a trait. Someone who reads regularly doesn't wake up debating whether they feel like reading. It's congruent with identity. Someone who values health doesn't rely on motivation. They rely on standard. Your job is not to chase transformation. It is to normalize it. Normalize learning. Normalize discomfort. Normalize reflection. When growth becomes your default expectation, stagnation feels unnatural. There's another layer here that matters: enjoyment. If your transformation is built entirely on pressure, it will eventually fracture. Sustainable change integrates satisfaction. You must experience evidence that the new identity feels better, clearer thinking, increased energy, deeper relationships. Pay attention to those signals. Reinforce them. Let your brain associate growth with reward, not depletion. Over time, something subtle happens. The behaviors that once felt aspirational become automatic. The conversations you once avoided become standard. The discipline you once forced becomes natural. And then one day, you look back and realize the old version of you feels distant. Not because of one breakthrough, but because of hundreds of small, repeated decisions. Transformation is not a dramatic event. It is a quiet accumulation. The extraordinary becomes ordinary through repetition. If you want this shift to last, reduce the drama and increase the structure. Fewer declarations, more rituals, fewer emotional spikes, more consistent standards. You are not building a temporary surge. You are constructing a way of operating. And when growth becomes your lifestyle, you no longer chase change. You live it. Chapter 9, The Power of Your Words. If I wanted to quietly dismantle your future, I wouldn't touch your finances, your network, or your opportunities. I would simply let you keep speaking the way you already do, because the most powerful force shaping your reality isn't your circumstances. It's your language, not just what you say publicly, what you repeat internally, what you declare when something goes wrong, what you whisper when you fail. Your words are not commentary. They are commands. Earlier, we explored how beliefs form the architecture of identity and how action reinforces that structure. Now we arrive at the mechanism that feeds both. Language. Words are how beliefs are installed. Words are how identity is reinforced. Words are how your nervous system is trained. Most people treat language as casual. They say things like, "I'm terrible with money. I always mess this up. I'm just not disciplined." Life is exhausting. They believe they are describing reality. In truth, they are prescribing it. The brain is not a philosopher. It is a prediction engine. It listens for repeated statements and assumes they are important. When you consistently describe yourself in a particular way, your mind organizes perception around that description. Say, "I'm bad with names" often enough, and your attention relaxes when meeting someone new. You expect failure. You stop encoding information carefully. Then you forget the name, and your belief is confirmed. Language becomes self-fulfilling because it alters attention and behavior. This is not mystical. It's cognitive efficiency. Your subconscious does not debate your statements. It operationalizes them. If you say, "I can't handle pressure," your nervous system prepares for threat when pressure appears. Your breathing shifts. Your posture contracts. Your working memory narrows. Performance drops. The sentence becomes true. But if you say, "Pressure sharpens me," your physiology organizes differently. You lean forward instead of withdrawing. You interpret adrenaline as readiness rather than danger. Same event, different language, different outcome. This is why words are leverage. Let's go deeper. Every time you use the phrase, "I am," You are reinforcing identity. I am anxious. I am behind. I am unlucky. Those aren't temporary states anymore. They become structural traits. There's a subtle but critical distinction between I feel anxious and I am anxious. The first describes a passing experience. The second defines a self. Identity-based language hardens quickly. High performers instinctively guard the I am territory, not with delusion, but with precision. Instead of I am bad at this, they say, I haven't mastered this yet. Instead of I am a failure, they say, that attempt failed. The event is separated from identity. That separation preserves agency. Now consider how often people rehearse defeat before they begin. This is going to be a disaster. They won't take me seriously. I'll probably embarrass myself. These are not harmless jokes. They are cognitive priming statements. Your brain begins scanning for evidence that confirms the script. Neutral signals are interpreted negatively. Ambiguity becomes threat. And then people say, see, I knew it. Yes, you instructed it. Earlier in this series, we challenged invisible rules and upgraded belief systems. But beliefs are sustained through language. If your vocabulary doesn't change, your identity won't either. So let's introduce a discipline, the word audit. For one day, observe every statement you make about yourself, your circumstances, and your future. Write them down if necessary. Notice patterns. Are you repeatedly declaring fatigue, scarcity, inadequacy, chaos? I'm so stressed. I'm drowning. I never have enough time. These phrases condition your nervous system to operate in survival mode. And survival mode is not where creativity, strategy, or leadership thrive. Now, this is not about toxic positivity. It's about accuracy and power. Instead of I'm overwhelmed, try I'm prioritizing. Instead of I'm broke, try I'm restructuring. Instead of I can't, try I'm learning how. The shift is subtle but profound. You move from helplessness to agency. Your brain hears possibility instead of limitation. Repetition matters. One empowered sentence won't rewire years of habitual language, but consistent correction will. There's also an external dimension. Language shapes how others respond to you. Compare, I'm trying to build something, versus I'm building something. The first signals uncertainty. The second signals ownership. When you speak with precision and conviction, people orient toward you differently. They sense coherence. They respond to clarity. But this only works if your internal dialogue matches your external tone. If you speak confidently to the world but privately undermine yourself, the misalignment leaks through micro-behaviors. Authentic power in language comes from congruence. Let's examine one more critical pattern. Absolutist words. Always, never, everyone, no one, I always fail, no one respects me. These words exaggerate and distort. They collapse complexity into fatalism. And the brain, once again, searches for confirming data. Replace absolutes with specifics. Instead of I always fail, identify the exact scenario that didn't work. Specificity restores control. It moves you from identity collapse to problem-solving mode. Language is a steering mechanism. Small adjustments redirect long-term trajectory. Here's a practical exercise. Choose one recurring negative phrase you use. Just one. Commit to eliminating it for 30 days. Every time it arises, replace it immediately with a more empowered version. Track the change in your behavior and emotional state. You will notice a shift, not because reality changed instantly, but because your interaction with it did. Remember, earlier we said you are playing a game most people don't realize they're in. Words are how you set the rules. They define what's possible, what's tolerable, what's expected. If you repeatedly say, "This is just who I am," you freeze identity. If you say, "I am evolving," you permit growth. The quality of your life mirrors the quality of your internal narration. So slow down your speech, especially under stress, especially after mistakes. Those are the moments when identity is most malleable. Speak deliberately, because your mind is listening. Your nervous system is responding. Your behavior is aligning. And over time, your world reorganizes around the story you keep telling. Choose that story with intention. Chapter 10. How your words control your reality. Most people think their life is shaped by circumstances, by luck, by other people, by events outside their control. But if you strip everything down to its core, you'll see something far more precise at work. Your reality follows your words. Not the words you say once in a while, but the words you repeat internally, daily, often without noticing. This chapter is about reclaiming that mechanism consciously. Here's the uncomfortable truth most never confront. The world does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you declare, reinforce, and assume through language. Your words are not descriptions of reality. They are instructions. This is where perception and language intersect. In Script C, the central idea is that reality is negotiable. But negotiation does not start with action. It starts with interpretation. And interpretation is carried almost entirely by words. Think about the phrases you use when something goes wrong. This always happens to me. I'm stuck. I can't win. Those are not emotional expressions. They are verbal verdicts. Each one tells your mind how to categorize the event. And once categorized, your mind filters everything that follows to confirm it. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it scientific labels. They recognized that between an event and a reaction sits a quiet but decisive moment. The moment you name what happened, lose control of that moment, and the external world runs you. Master it, and the external world loses its leverage. Words are how meaning enters the system. Two people experience the same setback. One says, "This ruined everything." The other says, "This redirected me." Same event, different sentence, entirely different future trajectory. Not because of optimism, but because of orientation. One sentence closes perception. The other keeps it open. This is not motivational language. It's neurological. The brain does not process reality directly. It processes symbols. Words are among the strongest symbols it has. When you repeatedly describe your life as heavy, unfair, limited, or hostile, your brain treats those words as environmental data. It adjusts focus, behavior, and expectation accordingly. Opportunities become invisible. Risk feels threatening. Movement feels pointless. Change the words, and you change the filter. But here's where most people misunderstand practice. They try to replace negative language with artificial positivity. That fails quickly because the mind rejects what feels dishonest. Stoic language is not about pretending things are good. It's about describing things accurately without distortion. Instead of "this is a disaster," the Stoic frame is "this is an event." Instead of "I'm being punished," it's "this is resistance." Instead of "I can't handle this," it's "this is uncomfortable, not unmanageable." Notice the difference. The emotional charge drops. Clarity rises. Control returns. Words either compress your world or expand it. When you say always or never, you collapse time. When you say everyone or no one, you collapse complexity. The Stoic removes these absolutes not to sound refined, but to stay accurate. Accuracy preserves power. There's another layer to this: self-address. The way you speak to yourself when no one is listening becomes the tone of your life. If your inner dialogue is hostile, rushed, dismissive, or fatalistic, your nervous system never stands down. You live in constant internal resistance. But when your internal language becomes calm, precise, and restrained, the body follows. This is why the Stoics emphasize discipline of thought, not emotional suppression. They didn't try to feel better. They tried to speak better internally. Emotion adjusts afterward. A practical exercise. For one full day, observe the words you use to describe events as they happen, not out loud, internally. Every complaint, every label, every conclusion. You'll notice how quickly language turns into judgment, and judgment turns into identity. This is hard becomes, I'm bad at this. This fail becomes, I fail. Interrupt that chain at the word level. Replace identity statements with situational ones. Replace final conclusions with provisional descriptions. Not because it sounds nicer, but because it stays truer. Truth is what keeps perception flexible. This is where script C's deeper theme applies. Most people are not trapped by reality, but by the story they keep telling about it. Stories are made of words. Change the words, and the story loosens. When the story loosens, behavior changes naturally without force. Language also governs expectation. What you repeatedly say about the future becomes the future your mind prepares for. If you speak in terms of struggle, your system prepares for defense. If you speak in terms of learning, it prepares for adaptation. Preparation determines outcome more often than effort does. This is why the Stoics trained themselves to pre-frame the day, not with affirmations, but with sober reminders. Things may go wrong. People may disappoint you. Outcomes may deviate. None of this requires collapse. That internal script matters more than any external plan. The final discipline here is restraint. Not every thought deserves a sentence. Not every reaction deserves a label. Silence, internally, is also a linguistic choice. Sometimes the most powerful move is to say nothing at all inside your own head and let the event pass unframed. When you control your words, you control meaning. When you control meaning, circumstances lose their authority. And when circumstances lose authority, your life stops feeling reactive and starts feeling directed. That is not motivation. That is alignment. Chapter 11, How Your Words Control Your Reality. Most people think reality happens to them. They believe life is shaped by circumstances, luck, or other people's decisions. But that belief alone already reveals the deeper truth they've missed. Reality responds first to language, not to motivation, not to emotion. Language, the words you repeat, internally and externally, are not descriptions of reality. They are instructions. They tell your nervous system what to look for, your attention what to filter, and your behavior what to justify. Before any action happens, before any result appears, language has already drawn the map. Here's the part few people realize. Your brain does not understand truth. It understands consistency. Whatever language you feed it repeatedly becomes the operating assumption it organizes around. Say something often enough, and the mind stops questioning it. It starts building evidence for it. This is why two people can experience the same event and walk away with entirely different lives. One says, "This always happens to me." The other says, "This is feedback." Same event, different language, different trajectory. Words are not passive. They are compressions of meaning. And meaning is the lens through which perception operates. Change the language, and you change the meaning. Change the meaning, and perception reorganizes. When perception changes, behavior follows. When behavior follows, outcomes shift. This is not philosophy. It is mechanics. Most people sabotage themselves through casual language. They speak without precision. They exaggerate. They label temporary states as permanent identities. I'm bad with money. I'm unlucky. I'm just not that kind of person. Every one of those sentences is a command. The mind obeys. Once a label is accepted, behavior aligns protected. The brain filters information that contradicts it and amplifies information that confirms it. Opportunities that don't match the identity are ignored. Actions that would disprove the label feel uncomfortable and are avoided. The person believes they are being realistic, when in fact they are being obedient to their own language. Words create borders. They define what feels possible, what feels natural, and what feels off limits. And the most dangerous words are not dramatic ones. They're the quiet, habitual phrases spoken without awareness. I guess. Maybe. I'll try. These are not neutral. They signal uncertainty to your own system. They fragment intention. They train hesitation. Over time, the body learns to associate action with doubt, and decisiveness begins to feel foreign. Contrast that with precise language, not positive affirmations. Precision. There's a difference between saying, I am confident, and saying, I speak clearly, I hold eye contact, and I don't rush my decisions. One is abstract, the other is operational. The mind cannot execute abstractions. It can execute instructions. This is where most people fail when they attempt change. They try to think differently without changing how they speak. But language is the interface. If the interface doesn't change, the system doesn't either. Your internal dialogue matters even more than what you say out loud, because the inner voice runs continuously, unchecked, shaping interpretation in real time. If that voice frames everything as threat, loss, or limitation, the body remains in defense. If it frames events as data, feedback, and leverage, the body stays adaptive. Notice the difference between these two internal responses. This is bad versus this is inconvenient but useful. One collapses energy. The other preserves agency. You don't need to lie to yourself. You need to edit yourself. Remove unnecessary drama. Remove permanence where none exists. Remove identity level conclusions drawn from temporary moments. Language should describe reality in a way that keeps you capable. This is why disciplined individuals speak calmly under pressure. Not because they feel calm, but because calm language prevents chaos from spreading internally. Emotion follows language far more often than people realize. If you want evidence, observe how quickly your state changes when you change your words in real time. Say, I'm overwhelmed, and the body tightens. Say, I have multiple variables to organize, and the body shifts into problem solving. Same situation, different command. Your reality does not change first. Your language does. Over time, this compounds. Small shifts in phrasing alter decisions. Altered decisions change patterns. Patterns attract new responses from the environment. What looks like coincidence is often delayed alignment. This is where people misinterpret outcomes as luck. They don't see the quiet linguistic discipline that preceded it. The person who consistently speaks in terms of responsibility, options, and timing begins to encounter more opportunities that require responsibility, offer options, and reward patience. Not because the world is biased, but because their perception is tuned to notice and act on them. Your words tune your attention. Your attention selects your reality. This is the hidden leverage, not manifestation, not wishful thinking. Alignment between language, perception, and action. If you want control, start here. Audit your language for a week. Not just what you say to others, but what you say to yourself when things don't go your way. Remove absolute statements. Replace identity claims with behavioral descriptions. Replace emotional conclusions with situational assessments. Speak in a way that keeps the future open. Because the moment your language closes a door, your behavior stops knocking. Master your words, and you master the frame through which life responds to you. Chapter 12. How your words control your reality. Before anything changes in your life, Something quieter happens first. A sentence forms in your mind. Most people never notice this moment, but it is where everything begins. Not action, not motivation. Language. The words you use, especially the ones you repeat privately, do not merely describe your experience. They define its limits. They set the range of what you believe is possible, acceptable, or inevitable. Long before reality appears fixed, it has already been named. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. You're always speaking yourself into a future, whether you mean to or not. Your mind is not designed to judge whether your words are accurate. It is designed to organize itself around whatever language is most familiar. Repetition becomes instruction. Familiar phrasing becomes internal law. Once a statement is repeated enough, it stops sounding like an opinion and starts behaving like a fact. This is why offhand phrases carry so much power. This is just how I am. People like me don't get those opportunities. It never works out. Each sentence quietly closes a door, not because reality demanded it, but because the mind obeyed the framing. Words shape perception, and perception shapes behavior. Behavior, repeated, shapes outcomes. By the time results appear, the original sentence has already been forgotten. All that remains is the illusion that life simply unfolded on its own. But it didn't. It followed a script. What makes language so dangerous is its invisibility. You don't feel like you're making choices when you speak internally. You feel like you're observing. In reality, you are constantly interpreting. And interpretation is never neutral. Every interpretation carries meaning, and meaning determines emotional response. Emotional response determines action or hesitation. Change the words, and the chain reaction changes with them. This is not about positive thinking. That approach fails because it ignores credibility. The mind resists language that feels false. What it accepts, however, is precision. When your words are specific, grounded, and operational, the mind engages instead of rebelling. There's a difference between saying, "I'm confident," and saying, "I pause before I respond. I choose my words deliberately, and I don't rush to explain myself." One is an abstraction. The other is executable. The nervous system responds to instructions, not slogans. Most people speak in emotional summaries. They compress complex situations into blunt labels: good, bad, failure, success. These shortcuts feel efficient, but they rob you of leverage. When everything is labeled emotionally, nothing can be adjusted strategically. Notice how different this sounds. "I messed up" versus "that approach didn't produce the result I wanted." The first creates identity-level judgment. The second preserves agency. Same situation. Entirely different future behavior. Language decides whether you feel trapped or adaptive. Your internal dialogue matters more than what you say out loud, because it runs continuously. It frames events in real time. If that voice speaks in absolutes, your body stays tense. If it speaks in assessments, your body stays responsive. Over time, this determines whether pressure sharpens you or erodes you. This is why disciplined individuals sound calm even in uncertainty. Not because they feel calm, but because calm language keeps their system organized. Chaos spreads faster through words and through circumstances. Pay attention to how often you use permanence where none exists. Words like always, never, everyone, no one, these terms feel expressive, but they lock perception. Once something is framed as permanent, the mind stops looking for alternatives. Language can imprison, or it can keep the field open. As outlined earlier in Script C, perception is not passive. It is selective. What you consistently name, you begin to notice. What you notice, you interact with. What you interact with shapes your trajectory. This is how subtle linguistic shifts produce results that look sudden or coincidental from the outside. People call it luck. They miss the discipline underneath it. when your words frame challenges as information instead of threats. Your behavior changes under pressure. When your words frame setbacks as feedback, persistence becomes natural instead of forced. When your words describe identity as flexible instead of fixed, growth stops feeling like self-betrayal. Your environment responds accordingly, not mystically, but mechanically. If you want control over your direction, this is where it begins. Not with dramatic declarations, but with quiet edits. Remove exaggeration. Remove self-condemnation disguised as honesty. Remove language that turns moments into identities. Speak in a way that preserves movement. This does not mean denying difficulty. It means describing it accurately, without surrendering authority. Precision keeps you sovereign. Sloppiness hands control away. Over time, your language becomes your baseline, and your baseline becomes your reality. By the time most people attempt to change their lives, they're already arguing against a decade of internal narration. They try to act differently while speaking the same. The system resists, not because change is impossible, but because the commands haven't changed. If you want a different outcome, you must give different instructions. Watch your words. They are always listening. Chapter 1. The invisible prison you call reality. What if the life you're defending isn't actually yours? Not your schedule, not your limits, not even your standards for what's possible. I'm not talking about fantasy. I'm talking about structure. The invisible framework that quietly dictates how you interpret everything that happens to you. Most people believe they're responding to reality. In truth, they're responding to their interpretation of it. And that interpretation was installed long before they had the awareness to question it. You wake up, you check your phone, you measure your progress against someone else's highlight reel. You label the day as stressful before it even begins. Nothing dramatic happened, but the frame is already set. The invisible prison isn't made of circumstances. It's made of conclusions. Conclusions like, success requires suffering. People like me don't get ahead. I'm just not wired that way. These statements feel factual because you've repeated them long enough to mistake familiarity for truth. But here's the uncomfortable realization. Most of what you believe about your life was absorbed, not chosen. You inherited rules about money, effort, relationships, risk, identity. Some were spoken directly. Others were modeled silently. Over time, repetition hardened into belief. Belief hardened into expectation. Expectation shaped perception. And perception built your reality. There's a moment that happens in childhood that almost no one remembers. It's the moment you stop asking, "Is this true?" and start asking, "How do I survive within this?" That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Instead of questioning the system, you adapt to it. If you grew up hearing that money is scarce, your nervous system learns vigilance. You become cautious. You avoid risk. You justify smallness as responsibility. If you were told that success belongs to other people, you don't even try. Not consciously, but your effort carries hesitation. Your ambition comes with apology, and you call this realism, but it's conditioning. Here's where psychology becomes practical. Your brain operates through filtration. It cannot process the millions of stimuli around you every second. So it filters, it prioritizes, it deletes. At the center of that system is a network often referred to as the reticular activating system, the RAS. Its job is simple: show you what aligns with what you already believe is important. Buy a specific car, and suddenly you see it everywhere. Focus on rejection, and you'll notice every slight. Expect opportunity, and you'll spot doors others walk past. The world did not change. Your filter did. Now scale that principle across your entire identity. If you believe life is a constant uphill battle, your RAS will highlight obstacles. It will amplify inconvenience. It will collect evidence to confirm your struggle, not because you're unlucky, because your brain is loyal to consistency. It would rather protect a familiar negative belief than risk the instability of a new empowering one. Think about two professionals walking into the same high-stakes meeting. One believes, I'm always underestimated. The other believes, I belong in rooms like this. Same environment, same